Welcome to the Galactic Tribune. Today we're going to be doing another video in our Versus Project series. Today is going to be Yoda versus Mace Windu. What do we think?
Well, first off, I'd like to preface, we know this one's pretty important because these are two of the most powerful Jedi.
The top G's.
The top G's. These guys are, they have it, all right? They've got it going on.
They've got the dog in them.
They've got the dog in them. So we understand this is very important to people, and that's, some people on the fence, like when we first started discussing this, we didn't really know, it's controversial. Some people have strong opinions, but ultimately, I'd have to say it's Mace Windu, all right? So some people would like to think it's as simple as they both fought Palpatine, Yoda lost, Mace won. But part of my problem with those kind of arguments is fights are not that simple. Just because someone beat someone once doesn't mean they could beat them again. It's not that simple. We have to break it down.
A lot of different factors.
Yeah. Fights are complicated. Just because someone beats someone 3 times in a row doesn't mean that they have an unlikely chance of losing now. But we gotta break it down though. So the obvious way to start is you look at the stances. Both arguably masters in the forms that they use.
Not arguably, just definitely hands down are the best of their fighting styles.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, Mace Windu created his, and he kind of forbid anyone from making it, from
What
using
a jerk.
it.
What a legend. What a legend.
But if you kind of group that with Juyo more, it's arguably,
Still
This has nothing to do with it, but I immediately thought Mace Windu would be the guy in Congress who would be like, I'm going to insider trade, but you can't.
Yes.
I'm going to do the illegal thing. You can't.
President had a term, then someone else had a term, then he had a term again, and then he said, no one can do that anymore.
No one can do that anymore.
Don't do it. So
yeah.
Let's make it.
They're both very, very aggressive fighting styles. Ataru, Yoda is small and old, but this doesn't stop him. He is very fast.
Attacks a wallop, yeah.
He uses his size to his advantage to get around people's defenses. Size matters not for him.
No.
No. Mm-hmm. He's very, very aggressive, and he uses this small blade not only. It's literally just for more versatility, more speed for him and against his opponents, which is just going to enhance his Ataru, really.
Right, and a Shoto blade works really well for Ataru specifically because it's not a blade where you need to overextend yourself. You dip in and out really quick, and so
it's wider than most blades.
Yeah, and the length of your blade, you want a shorter blade for an Ataru fighting style because you need to have those quick jabs versus like the gemstone when you're having to create the more weight you have and the more arc you have, the better you're going to do.
Yeah, probably.
So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You go ahead.
So, with the pod, one of the misconceptions of the pod is that it rechannels dark side energy from people. So the more aggressive, more dark side someone has, the more he just reflects it back at them. And people just get this, but that's just a simplification of what it really does. Ultimately, though, it's just a variation of Juyo, which is a very aggressive fighting style, which oftentimes was forbidden from the Jedi to learn because of how easy it is to tap into the dark side. And Vapad essentially doesn't shy away because, Juyo and Sith embrace that. Juyo Jedi just use the aggressive and just flat out brutal attacks and just uses the power aspect and tries not to get into the more aggressive side of it. But Vapad essentially tries to balance that, and I'm not saying balance in the force is blah blah blah, but this one does try to tap into that without being tempted, which is dangerous, but it's only tapping into aggressiveness. It's not something so selfish, but it's gotta be. It does help a lot, though. It doesn't necessarily, rechannel dark side energy back at people. But what it does do is specifically combats aggressiveness very well. It combats it's not a defensive fighting style, but what it does is combats aggressiveness very well, and that's where the rechannel misconception comes from. Is it does well at combating aggressiveness and not necessarily, what's it called, counter striking per se, but meets that head on and is naturally defensive. Kind of like a lot of people are praising Ahsoka for being Skull. I'm not saying he does Geo or Vapad, but what people are impressed by is how effortlessly he goes from attack to defense, and that's kind of what Vapad is based around as well. So, arguably, this is very effective against Ataru, which is probably the most aggressive Jedi lightsaber form.
Right.
And I think that's going to help him a lot in his fight against Yoda.
Yeah. With Mace versus Yoda, they both have really intense fighting styles, despite being some really calm, collected, cool-headed dudes. They got some of the most. They both have the top 2 aggressive forms, and with Mace Windu, like he would do pretty bad against Obi-Wan. He would still win, obviously, but even though Obi-Wan's form is defensive, it's not that rechannel style. But with Yoda, I think a lot of times people want Yoda to win, right? They say, "Oh, well, Mace Windu threw his fight against Palpatine," and that's where the main vein comes from. But I don't think it's as simple as this fight he won, this fight he lost, or this fight he threw it, this fight he didn't. And yeah, really, the duels look very different because they're very different people. Yoda's first target priority is the use of the Force. So you see him using, throwing the chairs at him, using his Teutonomus to reflect the Sith lightning. Whereas Mace Windu, and then Palpatine, he's throwing the chairs, he's throwing the lightning. But against Mace Windu, there's none of that. It's just purely a duelist form because they both, like, Mace Windu is known as the Battle Master. He's known as the lightsaber duelist. And so that's how that's how Palpatine is fighting him. Versus Yoda, he's known as the Grand Master. He's the Master of the Force, Master of the Order. So he's going to have a different fighting techniques against him. So Yoda fighting Mace, obviously Yoda's going to more focus on his use of the Force. And Teutonomus, great Force ability, but it only works against energy-based attacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna.
Mace Windu has none of that.
Yeah, a lightsaber is gonna. He's not gonna. He's just gonna get stabbed and died.
Yeah.
Died. He's gonna get stabbed and get killed. But or like forced move, Teutonomus ain't gonna work against that. I'm sorry. But Yoda's Force technique also. There's also a thing of like what he can and can't do. A lot of times in Star Wars, you see when they tap into their anger and aggression, they're able to do more. And that's not because the dark side of the Force is stronger. It's just quicker and it has easier solutions. So like Yoda can drop a truck on somebody, but he's not going to do that because he's Yoda. Now, like Yoda, he has the potential. He could pick up something the size of the Millennium Falcon and just destroy you. But it's not Yoda's nature.
Right, and it's a lot of concentration.
Right.
Which is the point, Mace is going to rush him, so he can't pick up anything heavy to really, that's going to be able to debilitate him. And he even did. Mace Windu is strong enough to, not necessarily per se, win in the Force duel like that, but he's at least going to be able to slow it down enough to get out of the way and challenge him. That's not going to be an effective attack.
Yeah. But even so, in a duel, Yoda's nature is not to kill without mercy. I say that, and then we have the image of Yoda stabbing the clones in Order 66. But Yoda, he's not. I think a lot of times you have to look at personality in this because that is a factor. As a Sith have a higher advantage in these fights because they are more willing to do what's necessary.
More trained in killing.
You're right. So, and not Mace Windu's not a Sith, but Mace Windu, you see, taps into that anger a little bit, taps into that aggression to get what's done. Yoda's got an aggressive fighting style, but he uses it for quickness, for agility. Yoda's not really an aggressive fighter. He's more still astute and disciplined.
Well, also part of it is Yoda has a lot of experience, a lot of years, and that's going to help. But ultimately, he's not as trained, as skilled with a lightsaber as Mace Windu. Mace Windu arguably has more training and probably could be a Jedi Battle Master. He's that well trained. He literally created his own form. That shows how well he studied. Because that's what Neman was for its time, at least in Legends. It was something that, the masters were like, let's create another form that's, we study this. That's what Mace Windu is doing. He's you can't just make your own lightsaber form if you aren't well trained, and we see Mace Windu is he's very effective. He's very effective at what he does. And at this, I think Yoda's size would help him. He's small, and
Really?
but I think sometimes some people like to think like speed versus or like agility versus strength, like speed wins or whatever. But it's like Mace Windu isn't and like I'm not saying that's true, but it's like necessarily, but Mace Windu isn't a brute. He's very strong, very skilled, very accurate. He's very disciplined. I feel like the size is going to not be as much of a factor as it compared to like someone like Savage or even Anakin fighting Yoda or Vader fighting Yoda,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is there any thoughts you have on Yoda and Mace, Jaden?
All right, so that's gonna be. No, I'm just kidding. No, go ahead.
That's how it would go. That's how it would go. I mean, especially like you're saying with Mace and Yoda, it definitely seems as though Mace does have an edge because of. I mean, yeah, we could say, oh, he created his own lightsaber form, but it's the fact that he's been able to create his own lightsaber form and master it completely. But it also seems as though that's been more of his focus is combat and dueling.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with his apprentice, he also did that. I mean, he's got a lot of experience with, that personal one-on-one combat as well. Well, Yoda, on the other hand, like you're saying, is more tuned to the Force, the cosmic force, the living force, more also centered in himself, and less focused on lightsaber combat. And in this case, I think lightsaber combat would win out just because, I mean, Mace is, too dumb to challenge him in his connection with the Force.
Right. I mean, also part of it is also like Yoda's size is kind of a hindrance to Yoda, and I think that is, like someone like it's like with Ahsoka fighting Vader, Yoda can't get in a saber lock with anybody because they're going to outform them. He's gonna collapse. His defense is gonna collapse, and Mace Windu is actually quick enough. Unlike someone like Vader, he's quick enough to
counter Yoda's strength and his size.
It's his speed and agility, So the point that it doesn't matter how quick you are, I'm quick enough to trap you, to saber lock you, and ultimately, and yeah, he's defensive enough that Yoda's not gonna be able to slash his ankles.
Right. Could one argue, devil's advocate, that the only fight that we have that's 1-to-1 is whenever Mace Windu is fighting Palpatine, Yoda's fighting Palpatine, that Mace Windu got Palpatine warmed up, and then he goes and fights Yoda. Now he is injured. He is injured.
He definitely got warmed up.
There was some heat. He heated up really quick.
Took some heat.
And so, I mean, that's kind of a stupid argument because it's so much more than one duel versus one duel.
Right.
But I mean, he definitely looked more confident. I guess it's because he knew Anakin turned to the dark side, but.
Well, with Yoda, I think the one what's the word I'm looking for?
Problem with our argument?
Well, the one thing that we're not keeping into account is Yoda's prime isn't the prequels. It's sometime in the High Republic. The High Republic is just now being fleshed out to greater detail.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could see a Yoda that can beat Mace Windu, but we know like he's old.
Yeah.
He's old. Like, and this is him old, like backflipping, cartwheeling.
Like, compared to like humans, he is like Qui-Gon. It's just that he's 60. He's old, but like in Star Wars, they're still 60. They can perform still.
He's
so
800-something years old.
Yeah. Right. With Yoda, I feel like there could be a version out there of Yoda that could beat Mace Windu, but we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So I would have, with the warming up deal, I'm not gonna lie, I don't.
Well, okay, but a fair argument is that some people believe Palpatine threw the fights.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even, no matter where you stand on it, he didn't throw it by that much. We saw Mace Windu's skill on full display, and I don't want to look to Legends. I won't mention it then. That's a whole can of worms that you can't.
We haven't even talked about Shatterpoint though. That's canon.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, how useful is that in combat?
very useful.
Remember when he opened the window?
That's
on the horse?
Well,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
It's literally just to help detect someone's weakness. You just keep it that simple. You can see the weakness within someone. It's not that hard. But the degree of power you have with it, the more fleshed out and revealing that answer will be. Because first you could get, it's like the difference between like a math problem. It's how sometimes like riddle games you like have an answer, then like you'll have like a big hint. That's what it is like with shatter points. But he's a master. He's very skilled, very talented, and skilled with shatter point. So, but ultimately it's like it'd be like me if I had was fighting Vader. It's like, oh, his weakness is that he's a little slower. He's got limited field of vision. You should exploit that. It's like, how? So it's like, so Shatterpoint has its limitations. It gives you knowledge, and part of it's like, what some people classify as like battle IQ. Like his would be off the charts with it, but you're not going to be able to exploit that, and
No.
and ultimately it's gonna be stuff like, well, I was planning on doing that anyways. So that's the problem with like duelist one-on-one.
Right.
But
so with all that in mind, like it's just to me,
it's more evidence for him.
It is more evidence for him. I think Mace Windu would beat Yoda, and obviously there's scenarios where Yoda would win.
Right.
Right. Like if they were like in a room and there was like maybe like a shipyard, sure Yoda's gonna be
shucking ships,
dropping trucks on it. But it's, even so, just in a normal duel, like it's Mace Windu.
I mean, yeah, for these versus series, we can't be like, oh, they're always gonna win, because that's the point. It's close. So with different factors, Yoda very could easily. But I just think for the most part, on average, you could say, or
in a well-lit room,
like if as fair as it could be and as often as it could happen, this guy is most likely to pull out through it. And I think most of the time, 9 times out of 10, you could say maybe closer, but for the most part, I feel like Mace Windu is gonna win more. He's gonna be able to pull through.
Yeah.
I would agree, 100%. He's definitely always been the better duelist as far as that goes. Jaden looks like he's having an aneurysm over there, so we should probably end it. Yeah. So please like and subscribe. Again, we're gonna be doing a lot of these, so please check back for upcoming videos, and we'll see you guys next time.